I once believed that family was a sanctuary, a place to return to, especially after profound loss. But 3 years ago, a car accident stole Michael, the husband I loved more than life itself. That night, the police knocked on my apartment door after midnight. Their expressions told me everything was over, even before they uttered the words, "did not make it." I remember standing there, frozen, my eyes fixed on the officer's rain-soaked shoes, wondering how the world could crumble with a single phone call. From that moment, I thought I at least had my parents and sister, that they would be my anchors. But reality proved different. Immediately after the funeral, my sister Rebecca borrowed money, claiming her eldest child needed medical treatment. I gave it without hesitation. Later, I discovered the money had transformed into a brand new SUV. My parents advised, "She needs a car to take the kids to school." Don't be so petty. I swallowed my resentment, telling myself to let it go. They were family. It didn't stop there. My brother-in-law, Daniel, pulled me into a real estate project he swore would bring huge profits. I invested $20,000, only for it to vanish without a trace, along with his empty promises. When I questioned it, the whole family said, "Don't blame him. Daniel only wants what's best for the family." Another time, my parents took my savings, accumulated from my first days of work, saying they would borrow it temporarily to help Rebecca pay off a bank loan. I didn't even have time to react. It was already a done deal. Gradually, a bitter truth dawned on me. It seemed to them I was no longer Charlotte, but merely a reserve they could draw from at any time. Those years, I lived like a ghost. By day, I worked at an insurance office in Madison, staring at spreadsheets to forget the emptiness. By night, I returned to my small apartment, gazed at my wedding photo, and drifted to sleep with quiet sobs. It wasn't until I decided to buy a lakeside house on Lake Mendota that things began to change. I used Michael's insurance money and all my savings. The house was old, with rotting floorboards, cracked walls, and a leaky roof. But to me, it was a place to rebuild. I wanted every brick, every coat of paint there to signify healing. The first day I stepped into that house, I sat on the floor, the sunset reflecting on the lake outside the window. For the first time in years, I felt a flicker of peace. I kept the house a secret for a long time, sharing it only with my 2 closest friends. One evening, as the 3 of us gathered in the makeshift living room, I confessed everything my family had done. Rachel, practical and direct, immediately said, "This is your private property. Don't let anyone get involved." Megan, gentler, placed a hand on my shoulder. "Family sometimes needs help, but helping doesn't mean letting them dictate your life." I forced a smile, but I knew they were right deep down. I couldn't let anyone touch this place because it wasn't just property. It was my new life. But I was wrong. When I thought I could peacefully start anew, my family again appeared with a new plan. A plan that, if I didn't stop it in time, would turn my lake house into their permanent residence. And when that Sunday came, I heard the words that froze me. "Next week we're moving into your lake house, just for a few months." I knew it wasn't staying a few months, but a scheme to take over. The first day I held the keys to the lake house, Madison still had scattered late snow. The old wooden door creaked a long groan, as if complaining about being forgotten for years. Inside, the musty smell clung to every floorboard, and weak light filtered through dusty curtains. But instead of feeling discouraged, I felt a strange excitement. I walked through each room, my fingers tracing peeling paint, imagining new color schemes. I looked at the leaky roof and was already envisioning an oak replacement. The old refrigerator groaned when opened in the kitchen, but I just smiled. It'll all be replaced. This will be a place to start over. In the following days, I spent all my free time cleaning and repairing. By day, I still sat in front of the computer screen at the insurance company. By night, I came here, wearing an old coat, sweeping dust, clearing piles of trash, tapping gently on walls to check their stability. The old house appeared in my eyes like a blank canvas, ready for a new painting. One weekend I invited Rachel and Megan over. Rachel looked around as I was still trying to scrub mold off a wall, frowning. It's dilapidated, but it has potential. If done right, its value will increase by half. Megan was gentler, placing a cup of coffee in my hand. It's so peaceful here. Just imagining sitting on the porch looking out at the lake in summer makes it worthwhile. We sat in the living room, the faint yellow light from the single bulb casting weak shadows. My throat tightened. Then, as if a switch flipped, I told them everything. I told them about the time Rebecca borrowed money for her child's treatment, but then drove a shiny new SUV to my house. I told them about Daniel pulling me into a sure-win investment project, only to vanish with my $20,000. I even told them about my parents using my savings to help Rebecca pay off a debt. And by the time I found out, it was already done. Rachel frowned, placing her coffee cup on the table, her eyes fixed on me. Charlotte, they're used to treating your wallet like the family's common purse. If you don't draw clear boundaries, they'll keep taking. I lowered my gaze, my hands clutching the hem of my shirt. But they're family. If I refuse, wouldn't it be too cruel? Megan took my hand, her voice softer. I understand. Family sometimes truly needs help, but helping doesn't mean handing over your whole life for them to decide. The living room fell silent for a moment. I looked at my two friends, one sharp, one warm. Two different ways of saying the same truth. I understood this house wasn't just a dwelling, but my final boundary. And this time, I wouldn't let anyone cross it. Sunday dinner at my parents' house always followed a familiar pattern. The long dining room with its polished wooden table, wine-colored tablecloth, and sparkling crystal glasses. My father, Edward, always sat at the head of the table, as stern as if presiding over a vital meeting rather than a family meal. My mother, Patricia, meticulously arranged each dish, seeing it as proof of an exemplary home. That evening, I arrived earlier than usual. The atmosphere in the dining room was quiet, except for the kitchen clinking of knives and forks. Dad glanced at his watch, a hint of annoyance in his eyes. Just as I expected, Rebecca and Daniel, with their 3 children, burst in nearly half an hour late. Shoes, backpacks, and coats were scattered everywhere, their laughter drowning the room. "Sorry, terrible traffic," Rebecca said, her voice devoid of apology. Mom immediately beamed, embracing the children and serving them extra food. Dad nodded to Daniel, pouring wine as if welcoming esteemed guests. I sat still, feeling like a stranger in my own family. We began dinner. Mom asked me a few questions about my work at the insurance company, then quickly turned to Daniel, eagerly listening to him talk about the real estate market. The children complained about boiled vegetables, and Rebecca smiled proudly. Everything proceeded at its familiar rhythm until Rebecca suddenly put down her knife and fork, her voice clearer than usual. "We're moving into your lake house next week. Just staying for a few months until our foundation is repaired." The sounds in the room seemed to freeze. My fork stopped midair. Dad immediately interjected, his voice light as if it were a decided matter. "That's right, Charlotte. Your house is vacant. It's reasonable for Rebecca and the kids to stay for a while. Yes, that house is spacious, and sisters should help each other," Mom added, her hands still busily serving the children. I looked at Rebecca. Her eyes sparkled with confidence. This wasn't a request. It was an announcement. The most evident proof was the children. "I'll take the room with the lake view." The eldest cheered. "No, Mom said that room is mine," the younger one protested. Their squabble echoed, as if everything had been arranged long ago. My heart tightened. Staying for a few months? For Rebecca, a few months could stretch indefinitely. I remembered the times she borrowed money, promised to repay quickly, then remained silent for years. I remembered Daniel and his sure-win investment project vanishing with my money. I remembered when my parents used my savings as if it were their natural right. A cold shiver ran down my spine. I placed my fork on the plate and took a deep breath. That house is not vacant. It's undergoing renovation, I said, my voice calmer than expected. Rebecca raised an eyebrow. Renovation? You just need to let us stay for a few months. It won't affect anything. Without answering, I opened my purse, pulled out a yellow folder, and placed it neatly on the table. All eyes immediately turned to it. I opened it, flipping through each page. The contract with the contractor, the building permits, the construction timeline. All bore signatures and official stamps. This is a comprehensive renovation plan from 3 months ago. It's expected to last 9 months, down to the wooden frame. The house will not be habitable during that time. The room fell silent. Dad stopped carving the meat, the knife blade glinting under the light. Mom's hand froze, her glass half full. Rebecca's eyes widened, her lips trembling as if she couldn't believe it. I folded the folder again, placing it back on the table, letting the truth lie between us like a wall. No one said anything further, but I read various emotions in each person's eyes: astonishment, anger, disappointment, and defiance. I raised my glass of water, took a sip, then sat up straight, calmly looking at them. For the first time, I felt entitled to keep what was mine. After placing the renovation documents on the table, dinner broke into a heavy silence. Rebecca blinked repeatedly, then forced a strained smile, as if I had just told a tasteless joke. Charlotte, are you serious? Just a few months. Our house foundation is damaged. It's dangerous for the children. You can't be so heartless. My mother immediately chimed in, her voice reproachful. You're always too strict. This is when family needs each other most. Your sister has 3 small children. They need a safe place. My father put down his knife, his hands clasped on the table, his gaze as if negotiating a contract. Charlotte, you're letting personal ego override responsibility. Family must sacrifice for each other. This isn't a big deal, just a few months. I sat still, a familiar feeling washing over me, the duty spiral they always used to pressure me into yielding. For years, from money to time, I had always been the one to give, but this time, the suffocating feeling was replaced by a cold, unwavering resolve. Mom and Dad, I said slowly, that house is uninhabitable. The permits are signed. The workers will start next week. This is a fact, not a negotiation. Rebecca sprang up, her chair scraping loudly across the floor. You're always selfish, Charlotte. I've lost everything. Now you can't even share a house. If Michael were alive, he would never let you treat family like this. Those words pierced my chest like a knife. I bit my lip hard, trying not to cry. My parents remained silent. No one contradicted what Rebecca had said. I took a breath, stood up, and gathered my documents. I'm going home. Dinner was good, thank you. No one stopped me. My shoes echoed on the wooden floor. Then the door closed behind me, leaving a room thick with tension. That night, I lay in bed, unable to sleep. A message from Rachel appeared on my screen. You did the right thing, but don't think they'll stop. Get ready, Charlotte. They'll be back more fiercely. I stared at the words. A part of me wanted to believe my family would understand. But my rational mind knew Rachel was right. Since childhood, Rebecca had never accepted defeat. I got up, sat at my desk, and opened my laptop. I wrote an email confirming the contract with the contractor, reminding them of the construction start date. I called the security company and scheduled the installation of a camera system for all entrances and exits. I also messaged my office lawyer, a former colleague, to send a power of attorney for legal representation in case of a dispute. The next day, I spent the entire evening at the lakehouse. The locksmith came, replaced all the locks, and gave me a new set of keys. He pointed to the control box. This electronic lock connects to your phone. Anyone who tries to open it without the code will trigger an alert. I nodded, feeling both relieved and pained. I never thought I'd have to protect my property from my family. A team of construction engineers also came for a final survey. They erected a warning sign at the gate. Construction zone. Authorized personnel only. Looking at the sign, a strange feeling welled inside me, as if not just the house, but I finally had a barrier. I sat on the porch as night fell, watching the yellow lights reflect on the lake. My phone vibrated again. This time a message from Megan. I know you're hurting, but remember, setting boundaries isn't selfish. It's the only way to find peace. I leaned my head against the wall, closing my eyes. In the darkness, I saw Michael smiling as he used to. He would be proud, I thought. Because after all, I had finally learned to stand up for myself, to protect what was mine. And I knew. The real battle had only just begun. Monday morning, I had just finished brewing coffee when my phone vibrated. A message from the security company. Unidentified truck approaching property. Camera footage recorded. I opened the app, my heart pounding. A moving truck was heading down the road to the lakehouse. I quickly drove there. When I reached the gate, a chaotic scene unfolded. Workers were setting up sawhorses and warning signs, while Rebecca stood with her hands on her hips pointing. Daniel sat in the cabin, frowning. The 3 children cheered, running around as if the place already belonged to them. Get these things out of the way. This is my sister's house. We have a right to enter, Rebecca yelled. The worker shook his head, pointing to the sign. Construction zone. Authorized personnel only. I got out of my car. Rebecca, I told you. The house is under renovation. It's uninhabitable, she spun around, her eyes blazing. Just a few months. You know that. Don't overreact like this. I held up my phone, showing the alert on the screen. Unauthorized entry attempt detected. At that moment, the electronic lock system blared. Unauthorized entry. Alert sent to owner. Rebecca was dumbfounded as her old key proved useless. I stepped forward, my voice decisive. You have 48 hours to move your belongings. After that, I will handle it according to the law. Daniel remained silent, looking at the ground. The children argued, I'll take the room with the lake view. No, Mom said that room is mine. I said nothing more, turned and walked away. 2 days later, I returned to the lake house. The lawn had become a storage dump. Sofas, wooden tables, even wardrobes piled high. Rebecca stood in the middle, a triumphant look on her face. If you won't let us in, then we'll leave our things here. The yard is still your property, after all. I didn't answer, pulling out my phone and calling, Hello, this is Charlotte Hayes. Yes, as per our agreement, please send the truck for collection. Half an hour later, the auction house truck rolled in. Employees began loading each item. Rebecca rushed forward in a panic. Stop them. That's my stuff. I spent a fortune on it. I held up a stack of papers. The contract, signed the day before. Abandoned property on my land is legally mine. I have the right to dispose of it. Everything will be auctioned, with proceeds donated to an orphanage fund. Rebecca screamed, her voice breaking. Charlotte, you're being too much. I put so much effort into buying these. How can you be so heartless? I looked her straight in the eye. If you valued them, you wouldn't have left them in the yard. I'm not being too much. I've just learned to set boundaries. Daniel stood silently, saying nothing. The employees continued loading items onto the truck, ignoring Rebecca's wails and the children's whining. Rebecca sank to the grass as the truck drove away, her eyes red. I stood still, partly in pain, but more relieved, as if a chain I had worn for years had finally been removed. Back in my Madison apartment that afternoon, my phone rang incessantly. Mom called, then Dad, then Rebecca. I put it on silent. Sitting in my chair, sipping coffee, I felt an unusual sense of peace. The lake house, and my life, would no longer be occupied by anyone else. As my team and I inspected the foundation the following afternoon, I saw the familiar sedan turn onto the driveway. Dust billowed, screeched to a halt right in front of the gate. My parents stepped out, looking agitated. Patricia clutched her purse to her chest, her eyes wide with panic as if she had just witnessed a catastrophe. Edward was cold, his gaze boring into me as if to assert dominance. "Charlotte, you've gone too far," he began, his voice heavy as a hammer. "The whole neighborhood is talking. What you've done is making this family lose face." I stood tall, still in my dusty protective gear, sweat beading on my forehead. What did I do wrong? This is my house. I have the right to decide. Patricia took a step forward, her voice trembling but reproachful. "Your sister has 3 small children. They are innocent. Why would you push our family into such a predicament?" I pressed my lips together. Once again, sister was the shield they used to push me back. Edward crossed his arms, lowering his voice, but it was sharper. "Do you realize that this attitude will force us to reconsider decisions regarding the family will?" I gave a slight smirk. The familiar threat, like an old song playing again. I signaled a worker to stop the tile cutter, then pulled a crumpled folder from my pocket. I opened each photo, presenting it to my parents. "This is the house 3 years ago after the flood. Water covered half the floor, and the walls were covered in mold. I was here alone, carrying buckets of water, clearing every plank. Where was everyone then? The whole family was vacationing in the Caribbean." Edward frowned, but remained silent. I flipped to another page, showing my phone. "This is the message I sent asking for help, for just a little assistance." "What did you reply, Mom and Dad?" "Too busy. We'll think about it later." That's all I got. Patricia covered her mouth, her eyes red-rimmed. I didn't know if it was from genuine guilt or just being exposed. I continued, my voice firm. "These are the expense receipts for the past 3 years. Every piece of wood, every penny for roof repairs. I paid myself. And this," I pulled out a valuation report. "The house's value has increased by 40% thanks to the renovation plan. This isn't impulsiveness. This is investment, achievement, my new life." Edward slowly removed his glasses, wiping them with a cloth. A gesture I knew well whenever he wanted to hide his discomfort. "What are you trying to do, Charlotte? Show that you don't need this family?" I looked him straight in the eye, my voice strangely calm. "No, I need a family that respects boundaries. Otherwise, I'd rather be alone." Patricia burst into tears, but I heard more accusation than regret in each sob. "Are you really so heartless? Don't you care about the children?" I clutched the folder in my hand, taking a deep breath. "I care about the children. But caring doesn't mean letting them grow up with a habit of taking. I've let that happen too many times. This is the last," silence stretched. Wind from the lake blew, carrying the clatter of wood. The workers stood far off, not daring to approach. Finally, Edward put his glasses back on, his voice lowered. "You'll regret it. Someday you'll realize you're all alone." I folded the folder, put it back in my bag, then turned my back. Alone but at peace is better than being slowly worn down by my whole family. Patricia choked back a sob, while Edward merely gave a cold huff. They returned to their car, leaving behind a cloud of dust as the wheels crunched over the gravel path. I stood still for a long time, watching them go. My heart no longer trembled as before, but held a clear resolve. If they wanted to continue to pressure me, they would have to face the wall I had just built. This house, and my life, would no longer have room for imposition. 3 weeks after the confrontation at the construction site, I received a call from Mom. Her voice was soft. "Charlotte, come home for dinner this Sunday. We need to talk things through properly." For a moment my heart paused, but then reason reminded me. Previous talks had always been sweet traps. This time I wouldn't walk in empty-handed. I agreed, but I was prepared. That evening, the familiar dining room appeared, polished wooden table, wine-colored tablecloth, silver plates gleaming under the chandelier. Dad sat at the head of the table, stern. Beside him, an unexpected guest, Pastor Williams, the family's longtime minister. I immediately understood. This wasn't a simple reconciliation dinner, but a trial hidden behind a meal with a moral arbiter. Pastor smiled kindly. "Charlotte, it's been a long time since I've seen you. I hear your parents say you've been busy renovating the lakehouse." My mother quickly said, "That's true, but she seems to forget that family is what needs to be built first." Edward nodded, his gaze heavy. "People say family should share. When times are tough, opening your door to each other is natural. You should learn that, Charlotte." I sat up straight, my heart beating slowly. The familiar rhetoric, a mix of morality and pressure. Pastor Williams nodded gently, his voice gentle. "Every parent wishes their children to love each other. I believe you understand that." I smiled, pulled my tablet from my purse, and placed it on the table. "I understand, Pastor, and I want to show everyone what I've been doing." A swipe of the screen. Images appeared, the lake house covered in scaffolding, walls stripped to the frame. I scrolled further. Workers dismantling the roof, dust everywhere. The atmosphere grew tense. I scrolled to photos of the new living room. Tall windows flooding the space with light, a kitchen gleaming with oak, a bedroom looking directly out onto the lake. This isn't just a house. This is my effort, my money, and my rebirth after loss. I am not rejecting my family. I am simply holding on to my last stand. I switched to the latest valuation report from the bank, which clearly displayed on the screen $610,000. I looked directly at my father. "This is the house's current value. I poured Michael's entire insurance payout and years of savings into building this. It's not a communal fund that anyone can freely take from." Pastor observed intently, then smiled. "That's truly remarkable, Charlotte. You've transformed an old place into a vibrant home. And remember, knowing how to keep what's yours isn't selfish. It's how family ties don't become burdens." My mother paused, her soup spoon suspended in midair. Edward remained silent, his gaze briefly hesitant. It was the first time he looked directly at the number on the screen instead of relying on moral platitudes. Just then, the door opened. Rebecca entered, her cheeks flushed, her breath rapid, as if she had prepared to demand justice. But the confident smile on her face stiffened when she saw Pastor sitting near me, his eyes still fixed on the screen with an admiring expression. "What's going on?" Rebecca asked, her voice slightly harsh. I didn't answer immediately. I just turned off the screen and put away my tablet. "This house, when completed, will be mine. But I'm happy to invite the whole family to the housewarming party in March. As guests, not residents." The atmosphere froze. Rebecca's lips thinned. Mom looked at Dad. Pastor Williams nodded again, his voice warm. "Charlotte is doing the right thing. A house can be beautiful, but if the heart isn't at peace, it loses its meaning. She has found that peace." I sat still, my heart beating steadily, feeling for the first time that the scales had truly tipped. That dinner didn't end with promises or hugs. It ended with a prolonged silence, but in that silence, I knew they understood. The old tricks wouldn't work anymore. 6 months later, the lake house on the shores of Mendota was no longer the old, musty, rotting-floored house I had first entered. It now shone brightly. A new cedar roof, gleaming hardwood floors, large glass windows embracing the deep blue lake. The first morning I woke up in my new bedroom. Sunlight streamed through the tall windows, reflecting shimmering golden streaks on the ceiling. I held my coffee cup, standing on the balcony, gazing at the calm water. After many years, for the first time, I felt complete peace. In the afternoon, the doorbell rang. Through the security screen, I saw my parents standing on the porch. Gone was their imposing demeanor. Edward gave a slight nod, and Patricia held a small potted plant. I unlocked the door remotely. "Come in." They stepped inside, their eyes unable to hide their surprise at seeing the new space. Dad slowly reached out to touch the Oak Island counter in the kitchen, his voice distant. "Charlotte, you've created an incredible place." Mom placed the potted plant on the table, forcing a smile. "It's truly beautiful. I never thought you could do something like this." I offered them coffee. No one mentioned the old arguments. No one mentioned Rebecca. Only Dad's slightly downcast eyes, tinged with grudging acknowledgement. After silence, he sighed. "Perhaps we pushed you too hard. It wasn't a full apology, but the closest I had ever received." I nodded, neither blaming nor rushing to soothe. That evening, as they left, my phone vibrated. A message from Rebecca. "Sister, I'm sorry for everything. I shouldn't have pressured you like that. Next month, dinner together? I'll bring your favorite dessert." I read the message again and again. Brief, lacking genuine warmth, but at least it was a change. I replied, "Okay, dinner next month. Bring dessert. No talk of moving in." I pressed send, then put my phone down, a slight smile on my face. A week later, I held a small housewarming party. Close friends came, including Rachel and Megan. Rachel walked around the living room whistling. "Charlotte, you've turned this place into a fortress. No one can intrude now." Megan smiled gently, clinking her glass with mine. "Not just a house, but a new life. And you deserve it." I looked around, the afternoon light flooding through the glass panes, reflecting on the smiling faces of my friends. At that moment, I understood that happiness wasn't about being accepted by everyone, but about knowing how to keep what truly belonged to me. Late that night, after the guests had left, I stepped out onto the porch alone. The lake shimmered under the moonlight. I recalled everything, from the night Michael left, to the times my family took advantage of me, to the battle to keep this house. Everything was like a hammer blow driving into a wooden frame, painful, heavy but necessary to build a sturdy home, I whispered, as if to myself and to Michael wherever he might be. I did it. This is my place, a house now worth over $600,000. But to me, its true value is the freedom it brings, and no one can take that away anymore. The gentle lapping of the water against the shore answered softly. I gently closed my eyes in the night breeze, savoring the tranquility. For the first time in years, I felt I was not just surviving, but truly living.